Hey, welcome to the Beginner Photography Podcast. Today, we're going to explore some easy ways for you to get into film photography. So let's get into it.
Welcome to the Beginner Photography Podcast, a weekly podcast for those who believe that moments matter most and that a beautiful photo is more than just a sum of its settings. A show for those who want to do more with the gear they have to take better photos today. And now, your host, Raymond Hatfield.
Welcome back to this episode of the Beginner Photography Podcast. All of my beautiful photo friends out there, I know that you're out there listening. Maybe you're on your way to work, you're at the gym, wherever it is. I just want to let you know that I appreciate you for tuning in. This week, we have a really fun episode with a film photographer who is based out of Atlanta, shoots weddings on film, also does film and digital. So you know that we're going to be talking about both of those and kind of doing a bit of a comparison, and you're going to find out why Steven says that the film versus digital debate is just ridiculous, and that we should just move on from that. So a lot of great stuff I know that you're going to pick up in today's episode. But first, I want to give a shout out to Iron String Bean, who left a 5-star review for the podcast on iTunes. I don't know if Iron String Bean is, I don't know who you are, but I do want to say thank you. They say this podcast has more than jump started my photography journey. Great host, great guests, all around awesome podcast with a lot of insight. The Beginner Photography Podcast has also helped greatly with my confidence as a photographer in these beginning stages. Fired up, and you are guaranteed to learn something. Iron, thank you so much for leaving the podcast a 5-star review. Be sure to reach out. Send me an email. Let me know who you are, so I can obviously say thank you properly, face to face, maybe virtually, whatever it is. But I do again want to say thank you. If you are enjoying the podcast, you can also leave a review in iTunes, which is just the best and probably the easiest way to leave a review for the podcast. And it's free, and it truly helps the podcast grow and lets other listeners who are struggling with photography find the podcast and help give them some insight as well. So that's going to be it. We're going to go ahead and get on into this episode of the podcast. Again, we're going to be talking a lot about film. We're going to be talking a lot about cameras. I asked Steven to mention some resources. There's going to be a lot of resources. So those are going to be in the show notes of this episode, which you can find at the beginnerphotographypodcast.com. It's actually just beginnerphotographypodcast.com. Now that I think about it, I also own the beginnerphotographypodcast.com. So just go to Beginner Photography Podcast. Whatever, you can Google Beginner Photography Podcast. You will find it. Head to the homepage. You're going to find all the podcast episodes there, as well as our free ebook, Picture Perfect Camera Settings, which has just been a fantastic resource that many thousands of people have downloaded and have said that it has been extremely helpful for them just getting started in photography to kind of get the wheels turning. I share actual photos of mine from various scenarios, from just shooting outdoors, shooting indoors, difficult lighting, shooting at weddings, shooting portrait sessions. And then from those photos that I share, I also share the actual camera settings that I use and how I determined how to use those camera settings, and then what you can do to tweak those to make the photos your own. Again, totally free, which you can grab it at beginnerphotographypodcast.com. It's right there on the homepage. So go ahead, if you haven't already, go ahead and check it out. All right, again, with that, let's go ahead and get on into this interview with Steven Wallace. You grew up in Canada, you moved to the States. Photography has always been a big part of your life, photographing weddings both in Atlanta and in Alberta. I want to know, because today you are very well accomplished, you're established, you've won awards, and you're known for your film photography work. I want to know, when did this all start from you? Because you didn't just wake up one day and here you are, in this position that you're at. It had to start somewhere. So when was the first time that you knew that photography was going to play an important role in your life?
Oh, geez. So yeah, we got an hour, so I don't have to be succinct about this. So this is always a rambling story. And I always give myself a hard time because I give way too much context. But yeah, for me, photography was kind of something I just grew up with. Like my mom and my grandmother were those people who would always have a camera with them, no matter where we went. Like we would stop on a family road trip at a Wendy's and they'd pull out a camera and start taking pictures of us. Um, and it was just something like growing up. I remember my mom saying once it was as important to them as having groceries, that we had like pictures and developing film and stuff. And being a kid, I wanted to do what the grown-ups were doing. So I just wanted my own camera, wanted to start taking pictures. And I grew up, I'm an 80s kid, so it was all film when I started, and was growing up with. And it was just, don't know how many hundreds of dollars my parents spent on like just cheap drugstore plastic cameras, not even disposable, like reusable 35 millimeter ones, and film developing. And um yeah, I just always enjoyed it and just kind of loved capturing the world, even though I didn't really know what I was doing. And then in high school, I still am really into music, but was like playing in bands and was really into like photographing like bands playing and stuff. But it was all just like with a little point and shoot film camera, and just always had with me in my pocket and hanging out with friends and stuff. Um, but it wasn't really until after I finished high school, I had no idea what I wanted to do, other than I just knew I didn't want to take any more math or science classes. That was pretty much
You and
like
me
I was,
both. Yeah.
yeah, right. I was, just done and wanted to take a break. And fortunately, my parents are crazy supportive people, and they were like, "Yeah, just take some time off, figure out what you want to do, just go get a part-time job." And I had actually spent some money from graduation on a Canon AE1, a 35 millimeter manual camera that the one of my favorite bands, the singer from, took a bunch of photos with that same camera. So I'm like, I love his pictures. I want to like take pictures like that. And I saw that it was this camera, so I just grabbed one on eBay. No idea what I was doing, um, but also just really fortunately at the same time I got a job working in a Wolf camera photo lab, like a little drive-through store, like an actual photo hut. And just fell in love with it, like the being able to shoot and then develop and print my own film like right there on the spot. And the first store I was at was super slow, and my manager was really chill, and he was like, just here, take a roll of film, go outside, learn something. And just got to kind of like play and get into it. And yeah, like I said, I got the bug really hard for it. I just started kind of learning as much as I could, and then decided I wanted to actually go to college and study photography. So like I said, after taking a couple years off, I was still working at Wolf. I was there for about 9 years, so all the way through like before and after college and afterwards. And um, just yeah, just started. Sorry, my noisy cat just walked in on me and totally lost my train of thought. Hey, buddy. So anyway, yeah. Or is that my long ramble here? So yeah, like I said, just fell in love with it. And kind of while I was going to school, which is kind of a fine art based education, um, I had a friend who was just kind of fell into shooting weddings, and was just starting to do that. And then he was in a wedding that he was also photographing. So he asked me if I would come along and second shoot with him and
Oh
get some of the
wow.
photos that he couldn't. And I didn't even have a DSLR at this point. So I borrowed a friend's, and then dude, I just fell in love with it. The actual like photographing, being part of a wedding, just the energy of it, the joy, getting to be part of one of the most incredible days of somebody's life and capture that for them. Um, and one of the most important days too, and like the people that they love all coming together, and to actually really serve somebody in that way, it just kind of clicked for me. And so I kept second shooting while I was in school and working my day job. And then in 2012, wow, I quit and went full time with photography, and I've been plugging away at it ever since.
Oh my gosh, I love that story. So obviously, there's a lot of things to kind of dive into a little bit deeper there.
Sure.
The first one, when we are kids and we have those point and shoot cameras, it's pretty hard to actually screw those up, right? There's almost no settings. It's literally you point it, you shoot it. So
Yep.
when it was time for you to get that AE1 and you had that manual control over your camera, were there any challenges that you faced like right away in terms of capturing an image now that you had all this additional control?
Oh yeah, totally. Like from the jump, when I first got the camera, I had no idea what exposure, ISO. Well, I mean, I knew what ISO film was. I just knew the basics because that's what you went to the store and bought. That the slower the number, it was for bright outside in the sun. The higher the number was like indoor and flash and low light, and I knew that, and you know, my mom was like, "Oh yeah, just this is the speed film you need for this thing." So I was kind of like just starting with that a little bit and what I'd kind of film I'd played around with, but aperture, shutter speed, any of that I didn't know what I was doing. The camera came and it had all these different like numbers and things on it, and part of me was like, just oh yeah, you just you load it up and you focus it. Thought that was the manual part of it. It was like, oh, this is just manual focus and manual advance, and then fortunately the AE1 has some automatic modes to it, but it's still like I want to say the AE1 is just shutter priority, so that's
Mm-hmm.
as fast as automatic as it gets. So it was definitely screwed up a lot of film. And even like not understanding how flash sync worked. Like I bought a flash for it and then it shot all these photos, and it won't tell you that it won't sync at any
Of
speed
course
other
not.
than 1/60th of a second.
Yeah.
Until I get a roll of film back and I'm seeing like this black line like halfway through all of my pictures where the shutter was moving too fast for it. So yeah, all that to say, I screwed up a lot, and wasn't really until I started. And in that time, it was 2003 when I got that camera, so it was not like the resources on the internet to learn and everything were not like what they are today. So it wasn't really until I started working at Wolf that I had like my manager and other people kind of showing me stuff, and I was like really learning how the things, like all of those features of my camera actually worked.
So I'll be honest. When it comes to photography, if I was just getting started, if like I knew that if I had seen a bunch of pictures, I liked photography, I think I want to do this, and then I got a camera, and I just screwed up roll after roll after roll, I don't know if I would keep going. So what was it that kind of kept that spark alive to keep you going?
Oh man, I I think for me, it's just been that I've always been visually investigating, if that makes sense. Like, I just, even before I realized what it was, like, through like looking through a camera, I just loved like spaces and lights and like just the way of just kind of like that way of looking at the world. Um, so I don't know, it just felt like something like this was what I was sub this just was just natural. Like it
Mm.
was, even though I was like absolutely disappointed at times and had images that I thought were going to be the greatest thing ever that didn't turn out, which I wish I'd grown out of that. But they, uh, yeah, geez, that's a really good question. I don't know. I don't think I ever had a point where I was just like, it's in my early days of like just messing around, like that I don't want to keep like learning this.
Hmm.
I think it was also just because the stakes were kind of low for me at that point too. I had access to cheap developing, film was cheap. I was living at my parents' house, so I didn't have to worry about like spending this money on rent instead of roll of film.
So at this time, would you just like you were working at Wolf at the time?
Yeah, I was.
So
Um,
you would get that film developed, and then I mean, would you like ask your coworkers like, hey, what did I do wrong here? Like, what do I need to do
oh,
to get better?
yeah, totally.
Hmm.
Like I would ask my manager was into photography, so I was asking him, and you know, just getting feedback from him and other coworkers and stuff, and then starting to, yeah, man, I think just learn by doing kind of at that point, and learn from my mistakes that I was making.
Mm-hmm.
I think that was one of the biggest things, was actually letting those failures not be failures, and that they were something that I could actually like learn from, and understand, try to figure out why that happened that way. Um, but yeah, I definitely had some really just gracious people who just took the time to kind of like answer my questions and to let me play around and everything too.
That's
So
great in a world where,
yeah.
like, you know, you basically had to go to a library and read to learn about something visual, which never made any sense to me. But
Yeah.
so when you say like let these mistakes, or not let these mistakes be mistakes, but like a tool to learn from, was there maybe like one thing in particular that you had a really hard time fully understanding in the beginning that you finally overcame, or did it all kind of slowly come together?
Ooh, that's a good question. Um, I think the thing that it wasn't necessarily like a technical thing for me in the beginning necessarily, because I really think all the technical side of photography and stuff you can learn. It's just learning a tool and a process.
Mm-hmm.
But I think it was photographing people was the biggest hurdle for me. Like, it's something I never wanted to do when I first got into it. I was adamant about, like, I'm not a portrait photographer. I don't want to shoot weddings. I'm just gonna like document the world. I'm just gonna be the guy wandering around with my camera, which I still love to do. Um, but like that was the only type of photography I wanted to do. I was that guy who people would be like, well, why aren't there any people in your photos? And I'm like, I don't want them there. I just want to photograph this place or this weird thing or whatever it may be. So I think actually learning how to connect with people in photography was a big hurdle for me.
So then,
And
I'm sorry, go ahead.
no, go ahead.
So then going to that first wedding, like, first of all, then what made you say yes? And then second of all, what was it about it that made you say, oh, wait, I totally changed my mind. This is fantastic.
Dude, I think it was just that I was getting paid for it for starters, and I was a college kid and needed, you know, it was just like, sweet, I can make some money doing photography. Let's go. And I don't think the fact that I wasn't the main shooter. If I had like, you know, just been like by myself, somebody was like, "Hey, you have a camera, come shoot my wedding," I would have probably said, "Not on your life. I'm gonna do terrible at this." But because it was my friends that we kind of got into photography at the same time, I knew him well. We'd hung out. It was just like getting to go do something to help a friend. And it just happened to be shooting a wedding. But yeah, I don't know. There was just something about like it felt like doing something that was bigger than me, and then also that was like, I don't know, like getting to be on the inside of this crazy thing, like
Mm-hmm.
being a part of like a wedding that is this like a traditional big, you know, full like day church wedding, and everything is just this giant mechanism almost that's just kind of like running. And but like being on the inside of it was like exciting, and it was different, and it was, you know, not my everyday stuff, and it was something that I wanted to do more of. And I guess I knew that I liked it, but my friend was my friend Tim, who asked me to shoot with him. It worked well. We got along really well doing it, and so he kept keeping working and kept asking me to shoot with him. And I was just like, yeah, I'm not going to turn down like a couple $100. Let's do this. And then it just more and more, the more I did it, the more I wanted to do it. And then started doing it, booking my own stuff, which the first wedding I ever shot by myself was, I feel really bad for that couple, and I hope they're doing okay, because they put up an ad at my school just looking for a college kid, and it was dirt cheap, and I did it, and it was very cringeworthy now in hindsight. But you know, but it was something that I wanted to, it was terrifying, but I wanted to do it again. Like I wanted to keep doing it. So yeah, I don't know if that long ramble answers that question.
No, it does. It does, and it's so fun to hear kind of your story, because I feel like I had a very similar story where it was like, not so much people, but then going to that wedding. First of all, there was cake, which was great, and like you could eat it. That was awesome. But then you're right. I mean, it's like it does. I've never heard it put that way. Like it feels like you're inside of this machine.
Yeah.
And
and like you're picking behind the curtain, like you're like what people don't get to see. You're like hanging out in the back of this hotel, or like you're seeing all these weird spaces and stuff, which just it feels like you shouldn't get to be there almost.
You know what I think it might be? It might be that, like, you're with the couple, they're surrounded by the friends and family who they love the most. Like, they have a history with these people, and you're the stranger. So, like, here they are interacting with the people, like, very comfortably. And and you feel that. You're like, oh, I feel very comfortable in this scenario, but, like, I shouldn't. Like, normally being this, like, knowing somebody for this short amount of time, like we shouldn't have this sort of a relationship, and yet it works. And I don't know, maybe there's something to that. Maybe I got to flesh that out a little bit more. But I appreciate that, that statement and sharing that kind of vision, because I've never heard it described that way. So
it's definitely weird. It's a weird thing what we do photographing people in weddings. I always joke about that with clients. I'm like, I know this is an awkward thing. You're fine. It'll be all right. But yeah, it is weird, but that's one of the things that I love most about photographing people now, is building those relationships with them. I think some of the weddings I've enjoyed the least have been ones where it's been people I haven't been able to get to know in the process of it, or it's just been like very, it's last minute, or like just totally through like an outside planner or whatever, that I barely get to talk to the couple or anything like that. The ones that I have the most fun with are the ones where I'm basically at this point getting to show up and hang out with a friend and do something for them. So that's I feel like if I'm doing it right, then I get to like stay in touch and like could hang out with this person 5 years from now and still have a great time.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Like I just saw, just right before this interview, one of my couples from a few years ago, probably like 4 or 5 years ago, like they're in Hawaii right now. And I was like, oh, this is so cool. Like,
oh, wow.
I like looking at those photos and thinking like, oh yes, I'm so happy for them, but because you're kind of right. Like there are couples and you look at it and you're just like, oh, that's right. I was at their wedding, wasn't I? And it just doesn't, it doesn't mean as much. And
you don't have that same kind of connection to them for sure.
Yeah. So I want to go back to that first wedding that you second shot. You said that your buddy handed you a DSLR to shoot it. By this time, had you been using digital photography, or was it pretty much just strictly film up until this point?
That was probably one of the first times I'd really used a DSLR. I'd been dabbling maybe just a little bit, just from the fact that I was working in like a photo lab and camera store and stuff. And so like I was working there during the whole kind of big consumer transition from film to digital, like in the early 2000s and onwards. So I was definitely I was becoming more familiar with digital cameras, but I didn't own one myself at that point. It was just all film. I was like scanning my film and then messing with it on a computer and stuff, in addition to printing it. But I don't think I had at that point really shot much on a DSLR, other than maybe just borrowing a friend's to mess around a little bit. But
so could you take me back to that experience? Like, I mean, this must have been brand new to you, right? Going from film to shooting a DSLR.
It wasn't that bad, because in a lot of ways, like, thankfully there's it felt really familiar, because I had at that point I'd gotten a Canon autofocus film system. So a Canon EOS Elan 7N, which was one of the last film bodies, 35mm bodies they made. So all my lenses worked on the DSLR I was using,
Uh,
and all of the control layout was super familiar. They actually modeled like that DSLR. I think it was the 30D, or I think it might have been the 30D I borrowed at that point. But it was modeled off of the design of the Elan 7N. So like all of the dials and everything was like, this is just like my camera, except it's a screen instead of loading film in here. Um,
and now it
so
has an
there
ISO
was
button.
Yeah, it has an ISO button, and I get to see my pictures right away, which is now one of my least favorite things about digital photography. But that's we can get to that
We'll
later.
get there. Yeah.
Yeah, we'll get there. But yeah, it was.
But it
Jeez.
wasn't changing enough for you to think, I'm gonna sell these old film cameras. Like, this is the way of the future. I'm gonna go
Oh
all
yeah,
in.
no, I've even when I got my own DSLR, because especially the time I was doing it, like second shooting and everything, I needed one. I was shooting enough that borrowing it wasn't practical anymore. Um, and even when I started doing my own weddings and stuff was on digital, I didn't ever want to get rid of my film stuff. Because I was always, for me, that was what I enjoyed. That was like what I connected with a lot, was in film photography. So I kind of compartmentalized it a little bit. The DSLR stuff is for like client. I got to use that for weddings and things. And then this film stuff is for me, or this is like more for like my school or like my art stuff or what I can use in the dark room or anything. Um, so yeah, no, digital wasn't like this revelation that made me want to like never pick up film again.
Hmm. But so then, at what point did you start introducing film into your weddings along with digital?
So that was actually when I quit my day job back in 2012. It was
So you
my
lost out
wife.
on that developing discount then, huh?
Yeah, I did, but at that point there wasn't much as far as like in-house film developing going on at Wolf
Mm.
Camera stores, just because the demand was dropping off on their market, and they were pulling out film processors because they weren't getting enough rolls to keep the chemicals like from going bad. So yeah, I did miss out on that, but I have actually had some great stuff since then. Like I actually have a good friend who we both were managers at Wolf Camera, that he started his own photo lab here in Atlanta. So I get that I go in, and before COVID, I would go in maybe like once a week to like help out and like do developing and like hang out and everything there. So still get that hands on like lab side of things and everything. Um, but yeah, you had asked me another question.
The
You know,
decision to add film to
oh, the
your
decision to
digital
add film.
weddings.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that was my wife Amanda. She actually said to me, "You love film photography so much. Why don't you shoot film for your wedding clients too?" And I was like, I didn't have a good answer. I was like, "Why don't I shoot film for my wedding clients?" And it was something that was it changed my wedding process a good bit, because I was kind of getting a little stuck in my ways of like, no, this is my wedding flow, this is how I shoot this. And it was a little bit of a ramp up for me to shoot the amount of film that I shoot now on weddings and things. But it was yeah, it made me love and enjoy photographing like weddings and portraits and things even more than I already did.
Would you mind talking about kind of that compartmentalized system now that you got for a wedding when it comes to shooting digital and shooting film? Like, are there different parts of the day that you use one versus another? How does that work?
Yeah, totally. So if well, I mean, when it comes down to it, like a film or a digital camera is just a tool. And they are, like it's if you're painting in a different medium, oil or acrylic, or they have different, characteristics, and they have different feels, and people are drawn to use them for different things. But they are both just means of, in a camera, like a tool for capturing an image. Um, so ultimately, it's just whatever's the right tool for the job. Um, and there are, if I had my druthers, it would be like totally, I would love to shoot nothing but film on a wedding day, just from like start to finish. But there's some reasons that it's just not as practical, whether it's like really tricky lighting situations, like a super dimly lit like ceremony indoors, or taking, you know, like 100 pictures of the same drunk uncle at the reception. Whatever it may be, there are times at a wedding that having a digital camera is a lot more practical and easy in some cases. Um, so a lot of times I shoot. Um, I mean, there are times I'm shooting both. Like, you know,
Oh,
maybe
really?
it's yeah, absolutely. Like I'll have I've got a dual camera holster, so I'll have like a film camera on one side and a DSLR on the other. Um, and so it's sometimes it's kind of like just for a little bit of redundancy. If it's something that's like super important, I want to make sure that I've got it on film and I've got it on a memory card too. Um, there's times when it's really nice to make sure like I want to have a preview available for that client like right away, like next
Mhm.
day or the next couple days if I can, just because that is something that people really love to see these days with digital, is like the excitement of it. And I want them to be able to see that photo and share a good image from their wedding and everything too right away. um but there's yeah, I mean, it would just kind of depends on the situation. For the times of things I really do love to shoot on film are like the kind of more the creative portraits, like the couple, the wedding party, um, details, you know, things where it's not necessarily about just the pace of things going, but where you can slow down a little bit more, and really kind of take a little more time with. But yeah, I would say the portraits are really like the couple portraits are one of the main times that I'm shooting film at a wedding. Um,
So on your website, I read that you have this little section of like why I shoot film, which I think
yeah,
is so cool because there's got to be a number of couples who are going to choose you because they also want photos of themselves in film. It's gaining popularity, but one of the things that you said is that the film versus digital debate is just silly.
it is. It is absolutely silly. It shouldn't exist. It's just wasted breath at this point. It's like just everybody just get over it and move on. Let's just go out and take some pictures.
Okay, I get that, but I need you to expand upon that. Like what is it about this that is silly? Because if they both work great, I mean, wouldn't the you know, I'm playing devil's advocate here, but wouldn't like the logical thinker think, well, I have to compare these two and figure out which one is going to be the best tool here?
Sure. I mean, yeah, absolutely. You do have to compare them, but it doesn't have to be an either or. It can be a both and. Um, and I feel like especially like some people who, like you said, kind of got who had been, especially some professionals who had like been shooting film for decades for weddings or whatever, and then they got a DSLR, got their first digital camera, and they never went back. Um, for some people, it's like film is they have this idea that film is obsolete or dead, and why would you ever shoot that? That's ridiculous. And then there's other people that are like, well, digital is soulless. There's no like, you know, warmth to it. It's this cold, you know, ones and zero medium. Why would you ever shoot that when you could take something that's, you know, real on a piece of film? And it's yeah, I don't want to belittle anyone or like anyone's choice or anyone's tool that they've been able to connect with. Or they found like this is the medium that speaks to me and that I'm able to actually express myself with and capture the world and capture people with. So whether it's like a DSLR, an iPhone, a point and shoot film camera, or somebody's like walking around with a giant like 8x10 view camera with bellows on it, and that's the way that they see the world, and that's the tool that's like really clicked for them. um yeah, I think that they all have value and they all have merit. And absolutely, yeah, you've got to compare and see the differences in the feel, and there's different, you know, just like choosing from a different system of digital cameras even, and like, you know, whether you're whatever lens mount you're going for, whatever camera system you're in, is because you like the way that it performs and feels versus something else. So there's absolutely, there's going to be comparisons and, like, you know, figuring out what works and you connect with, but I don't think it has to be like, if you love film, then digital is crap, and vice
Hmm.
versa, you know?
Of course, of course. I find kind of like what you said earlier. I find it easy to really like compartmentalize my different cameras because there's so many of them, you know, and especially when it comes to film. You know, when I go to a wedding, I am okay with literally taking thousands of photos that day because, well, part of it is that it's an insurance policy, I suppose,
Sure.
right? You know, to make sure that you have enough, and why not? Like, it's cheap enough. Like, if you see the moment, like, why not try to get a few photos within that moment? You know, you can really get that best one there. But when it like comes to like home stuff, I love, like, I'll shoot like with a GoPro. I'll shoot with my phone and like not even look at it, just like weird
Yeah.
angles. Same with like I bought this at my local camera store. They had like this used camera bin, and they had a Mamiya a 135 AF here, and it's totally point and shoot, totally point and
Oh,
shoot.
that's
There's
beautiful.
nothing that this thing
Yeah.
does, right? It just, you take the picture, you advance it, and then that's it. And what I love to do is like turn on the flash, right? Just to make the
Hmm.
photos just something more interesting there. But then
Just something different than what you're seeing all the time. Or yeah, absolutely.
yes, exactly. So do you think that when it comes to that debate and why it's silly, and like why, I guess why it doesn't matter anymore, is that like we've gotten to this point to where it's like digital is, like, of course it's more economical, it's more efficient, it's more of like all these things, but part of photography is still fun, and that, you
Yeah.
know, there's that element to it. Like, do you think that there's some of that?
Oh, 100%. I definitely do. I mean, like I said, the time that I was working at Wolf was the, oh, is this going to be the DSLR that quality surpasses film? It was always
Ah,
like, how many megapixels do you have to get to have more resolution than a piece of 35 millimeter film, and so on. And, you know, I'm like, I don't care.
yeah.
Really. Like, I don't shoot on a 35 millimeter film camera because I'm trying to have, like, you know, 100 megapixel resolution out of it. I shoot on it because I enjoy the process of making an image with that camera.
Yeah.
um so yeah, I think that is kind of why it's silly. Why would you limit someone else's creativity because you don't connect with the same tool that they do?
Yeah, yeah. It's like kind of like I was saying before we hit record here. It's that, like, I love this podcast because I want to learn, like, we've all seen those videos on YouTube where it's like we took 5 photographers and gave them the same scene and they got, you know, 10 different images or whatever. It's like we all see the world a little bit different.
Oh,
Why
totally.
can't the tools that we use be a little bit different than everybody else? So I love that that aspect that you got there. Um, then I had like 9 questions that I was like super excited to talk. Well, I guess we'll just kind of stick on this wedding theme, which is,
Okay.
you know, when shooting a wedding, I've so I guess this is the question that I just have no knowledge of, and I would just love to hear your answer.
Sure.
Now, when I see photographers who offer, you know, film coverage at a wedding, typically it's something with like 645 or something medium format,
Hmm.
and it's going to be like a completely different aesthetic than the digital work. And it sounds like you're still shooting 35 at weddings. Is that right?
So I shoot a mix of both. I shoot, when it comes to a lot of the portrait stuff I do at a wedding, I shoot mostly on medium format on 645. Like,
Oh, okay.
my workhorse is a Pentax 645N, which is just this
Tank.
beautifully simple, like, medium format camera that just, it works. The autofocus is actually accurate. It's reliable. It's just, I love it. Took me some while to find the right medium format system that would work well for weddings, and that was totally it for me. Other people, it's a different camera. But yeah, so I do shoot a lot of medium format for that and for portrait work and everything too.
So
Um,
having the same lens mount isn't like the one thing that you must have. You can have
no,
the different
no,
camera
not
now.
at all.
Uh huh.
I definitely, I always have my 35 millimeter and my DSLR, like, in my big gear bag and everything too, because there are some times where it's nice to have that option to whether it's just being able to use the slightly faster lenses on a 35 millimeter equivalent system, or there's even some, yeah, just the certain look of it sometimes. Well, it's like shooting a really high speed black and white film on 35 millimeter and just embracing the nasty grain that comes out of it,
Yes.
um, yeah, so there are some times where it's nice to have that, or have
Uh-huh.
the speed or the larger number of shots per roll, um, which I mean is 36 typically on a roll of 35 millimeter film,
Mhm.
or on the medium format is 16 shots per roll before I'm having to swap a film out. So it's still not a ton, either way, but yeah, it's just having that other option and tool. And for me, just throwing that extra body in my bag doesn't take up much space because I already have all those other lenses.
Right, right. So I've never had to deal with this, but like when it comes to shooting on film, like I'll embrace how crazy the colors might come out, or just really try to experiment and try to get something new quite often. I've never had to match the film photos that I get with digital images, right, that you would do at a wedding. So how do you deal with any sort of consistency across three different systems, three different you got the digital, you got the 35 millimeter film, and then 645 as well. How do you deal with creating any sort of consistency within all three of those systems?
Yeah, so that definitely has been a long process for me, probably more so than some other people who have gotten into it in the last few years, just because when I started kind of incorporating film into weddings, there weren't the same kind of like film emulation presets and like actions and things in Lightroom that there are now that work actually really well. So I was all trying to do that by hand, and trying to match them. And then at a certain point, I'm just like, you know what, I give up. I'm just going to have these be totally different. It's not
Oh
going to
wow.
be cohesive. It's going to be like, this is the film image. These are digital. Here you go. Which never totally sat well with me, just because I want to give like somebody's looking at the photos of their wedding. I don't want them to be pulled out of that moment and thinking about, oh, which camera did he use for this? it that shouldn't matter when they're thinking about like, this is a picture of my grandfather, who I haven't seen in 5 years or whatever it may be. um yeah, I trying to get that match in that system. So I went from going from just doing it manually to Maston Labs presets in Lightroom to now I'm using the archetype process,
Mm.
which I just have liked the way that it works. Specifically, like in digital, I shoot a 5D Mark IV, so I really like the way that handles the colors from the Mark IV, and it does a really good job of kind of getting closer to the look that I get out of the film that I shoot. And just, yeah, having kind of a consistent way of shooting across the board is helpful too. um and just knowing kind of like what the film you're using is capable of is really helpful. Like to get into the weeds of it a little bit, like my bread and butter like film stock for shooting weddings is Kodak Portra 400, which is just a super versatile, even forgiving in some instances film. And I know that film really well. I've shot, geez, probably thousands of rolls of it at this point, and I know what I can get out of that film in a given situation. So, um, yeah, it's just learning the tool, still, and like learning what I'm going to get out of it. And a big part of the process in shooting film now is, as it was, in the 80s, 90s, whenever, is having a relationship with your photo lab, and actually communicating with them the images you want, because there is that in between step. Unless you're the guy who's doing everything yourself by hand at home, which I do some of that myself. But when it comes to like my client and wedding work and stuff, I want that actually professionally scanned. I
Mm.
want the get the most out of the film that I'm shooting and get a consistent result. So communicating with the the lab that's developing and scanning your film, and knowing like, well, this is, these are the images I'm going for. Let's figure out how I can get those images. And even working with them and knowing like them being able to look at your negatives and be like, well, this was super underexposed. That's why it looks this way. And learning from those mistakes again, same thing too.
Right.
So yeah, it's a little bit of a challenge, but I think it's something that I've just the more and more I've done it, the easier it is for me to kind of like integrate and make it kind of like a seamless thing. And even if there's a shoot or something like that, I'm shooting almost no film or no film at all on, it still has that. It's become the look of the images I make because it's the way that I'm shooting and the way that I'm editing. So it still has a cohesive look from a wedding or a portrait shoot that I might have done a few dozen rolls of film on or whatever it may be. So yeah, it's just kind of been just getting more and more into my process and discovering like the style of images that I like to make and deliver to my clients.
Mm-hmm. Are you just delivering the photos that come out of camera from like from your film, or are you doing any sort of post processing to those photos?
Yeah, I definitely am. I think it's totally worthwhile to spend time like editing scans from film too. It's not going to be, you don't have to do as much to them as you do like say a raw digital file. But yeah, I don't want to ever give somebody something that's I feel like is unfinished. So whether it is just even making sure that the cropping is the right way I want it, or just straightening it slightly, or going in and adjusting, levels and brightness and contrast and everything. I just want to give that level of care to yeah, whatever image, whatever I'm delivering to my client as a finished image.
Okay, and then he's really excited over there.
Yeah,
And then,
he is.
just in case anybody's listening and is wondering, like, where's my cat? It's not your cat.
Oh yeah,
Steven's cat over here.
It is my cat Bob, who is like never fails. Doesn't want to have anything to do with me until like I'm actually like sitting down
Right.
at the end of the day.
That's like
Jasper,
my
my
kids.
son, has gone to sleep. Yep.
Yeah.
Exactly. He's like the boy is asleep. This is my time.
That's hilarious. So when you get back your roll of scanned images, at that point, do you then just take your raw photos from a wedding and then try to match them to the film itself, or is there another layer to that? Can you walk me through that?
Yeah. Yes, in not so many words. I do take the raw files and try to match them to the film scans. I do a little bit of both, trying to even adjust what I can on the film scans too, to just kind of make it be the most cohesive I can and the most kind of like just present the best photos I can to my client. So yeah, I guess I do. And then just any kind of obviously creative touches on the editing side of things, whether it is from the cropping or converting to black and white or whatever it may be. Yes.
Yeah, I gotcha. Okay. When you're shooting film, are you doing anything when you're shooting? Are you underexposing and then pushing it in post, or do you shoot at box speed and then just get back what you get?
Yeah, it's a good question. So it totally depends on the situation. For the most part, I shoot Portrait 400 I will rate it at 320 ISO, which totally depends on, your audience and like their experience with shooting film. But the box speed of the film is like, if it's a ISO 400 roll of film, that's what it says on the box of it. But like you said, there's all these things you can do as far as like the way that you actually expose that roll of film, and then how it's developed. To push process something would be to overdevelop it a certain amount of stops. So in some ways, you're kind of effectively making that roll of 400 speed film by pushing it one stop. You're adding some characteristics to make it closer to like an 800 speed roll of film. And it can mess with like contrast and colors and things too, and bring out more grain. But the way that you rate the film basically means like this is what you're setting your camera settings for. So all that technical ramble to say, color negative film is, well, and black and white negative film too, both love light and are much it's much better to err on the side of overexposure and giving them too much light than not enough. Slide film is the opposite. It's has very low exposure latitude, and you can blow out the highlights on it in a stop or two of overexposure. You can blow out a lot more than just the highlights. You can blow out the entire image in a couple of stops.
And that would be a film stock like what?
Like the new Kodak Ektachrome E100 that was just reintroduced a couple years back, or Fujifilm Provia or Velvia, are some of them. Those are some of the main slide films that are available today. And then like a black and white negative stock would be something like Kodak Tri-X or Ilford HP5, or there's a bunch of like smaller manufacturers of black and white film too, like why can't I think? I know all these. ADOX, F-Key, Japan Camera Hunter makes his own film. So there's a bunch of like black and white negative film manufacturers outside of just kind of like the main ones. And then color negative film would be just color film, like the whole Portra range from Kodak, Ektar. That's what we're used to like picking up in a drugstore and getting like developed in 1 hour photos, typically color negative film. But yeah, so all that to say, told you I give way too much context and stuff.
No, I'm enjoying it.
Okay, good. So yeah, on the color negative film, it is especially Portra 400. Like some of these newer stocks, it is really, you have to really, really be trying to overexpose it to the point of no return. You can overexpose Portra 400 7 stops and still get a great usable image out of it.
That's
like
crazy.
if you overexpose the digital file 7 stops, you just have a white screen.
Yeah.
There's nothing there.
You're done. You just go home.
Yeah. So I always to answer your original question, that I always rated at 320 just to give a little bit of like that's a fraction of a stop more, but then I always meter it for the shadows. So that I'm always kind of erring on that side of overexposure. So if I do if I do kind of, my exposure is not quite dead on, as long as I know I'm going on the over side of things, I know it's going to result in a great image. Portra 400 is a little more forgiving than some other stocks on underexposure. Like you can get away with underexposing it a little bit more than you can something like Fujifilm's Pro 400H or a few different other color stocks that are out there. But yeah, that's my typical, is rating it at 320. There are people who you can get, how you rate an exposure film produces different looks too. Overexposing it more changes the kind of tones and look of the film. So there are some people who love to shoot Portra 400 at ISO 200 and overexpose it a whole stop, or there are people who like to shoot Portra 160 at 320 and then push it a stop to make it like more contrasty and a little grittier looking. And so there's all different ways you can actually experiment and shoot different types of film to find like the look that you want. So it's not, there's a lot of there's a lot of options, and like one particular film stock can be really versatile and dynamic, just how you actually treat it and use it.
So if somebody's just like getting started when it comes to film photography, they're interested in it, they want to know where to start. Here we are. We're talking Ektachrome, we're talking portrait, we're talking pushing, we're talking underexposure, we're talking rating, all these different things.
We haven't even started on reciprocity
We
failure
haven't even
or
started
anything
talking
like
about any of this
that.
stuff. Or
Yeah.
developing times. So,
Yeah.
what would just be a good film for somebody like just getting started, wants like the easiest way, wants the most versatile, uh, I'm guessing probably something C41. Like what
Yep.
would probably be the best sort of film stock for them just to get started with and know that they can get a good image?
Yeah. So I mean, the most versatile film probably out there is Kodak Portra 400, but it's also not as cheap as some other films are. One of my favorite. So if somebody's looking for something that's gonna like give them the most wiggle room and be the most forgiving, that's the way to go. But you're looking at about $10 a roll of 36
36.
exposures on that. Yeah. Um, there's a film that I shoot a ton of. I have loaded in one of my cameras right now for just personal stuff, walk around, my family. Everything is Kodak's Ultramax 400. Which it's a consumer film, but it's gorgeous. It's this beautiful film. It has really nice warm tones. It's got a good amount of contrast. I just like the way that the images come out of it. And you want to err on the side of giving that a little bit overexposure too, but it's just I love that film, and it's cheap. I mean, it's less than half the cost than a roll of Portra 400. So that's gonna hurt a lot less if you're, getting an entire roll of blanks developed out of than, So that would be my recommendation is something like Kodak Ultramax 400 is a great film.
And that's something that I think I can actually pick it up literally like at my like Walmart or Meijer or like whatever like
yeah.
the big box store is. Like they
You
have
can
it.
still find that in some, it just depends on where in your town, but yeah, you could still find that at a drugstore, at a Walmart, or depending if they carry Fuji stuff instead, like Fuji's Superior 400 film is still in almost every Walmart around. So that's a great option too. I mean, these consumer, cheap films are great. They're better than they ever have been. And you can create some fantastic images out of there.
So
And they're great to learn on too.
Right. Yeah, especially the cheaper that it is. So, when I first started just using like point and shoot type cameras, I remember very well going to my Walgreens to get the photos developed, or Costco if we were lucky enough to go to Costco that day and my parents would take us.
You got to get like that giant hot dog or a piece of pizza while you're there.
It's the pizza. Yeah, I'm not messing around with those hot dogs. It's got to be the combo pizza every time.
Excellent.
But I could go there, I could drop off the film, and then by the time we were done shopping, I would have my prints, right? Even when I moved out to Indiana, the Walgreens here still had a 1 hour photo, and that's where I would get all of my photos developed. And I'm not even going to get into the fact that it was like the worst scans in the entire world. Like I'm pretty sure that they just like took a picture with their Motorola Razr phone and then printed that from it.
Excellent.
But now it's very hard to find 1 hour photo. So if anybody is getting into photography now, specifically film photography, now they have a few rolls of film. What do we do with it? Like, where do we go? Do we have to ship it to somebody? Like, what do we do?
So it totally depends on where you are. There are some places like here in Atlanta, we're lucky enough to have 2 labs that do full. One of them does, the one that I use and have friends that run, does everything from all 3 main types of film: color and black and white and slide film in-house. And there's another one on the other side of the city that does, I can't remember if they do the other, they definitely do a ton of color film. I don't know if they process 1 hour or process in-house black and white, but all to say, we're lucky that we have a couple of labs right here in Atlanta. But that's not the case for a lot of the country. There's a lot of places where you do have to search it out, and shipping your film has kind of become a standard thing. And there's fortunately it's become kind of a real cottage industry that is, and thriving in the last few years, as far as having these labs that specialize in film photography and developing. And there's a lot of them as far as varying their cost and their quality and how much they actually cater to their clients and everything. So there's a lot of options out there, and there's some great resources. Like one website that I love for just photography and film photography in particular is emulsive.org. um it's just a treasure trove of information. It's a lot of like community sourced, like I always having people writing articles and reviews on different types of film. There's a lot of technical stuff and guides, but they do have a worldwide film lab resource on there that they do a pretty good job of keeping up to date. And so you can actually go and find a film lab that's in your city or your region or possibly your country, and find a place where you can get your film developed and get a scan, get prints, whatever it may be. So there's options out there. It takes a little bit more digging than just being able to like drive down the street, but it's absolutely worth it and worth looking into it. And there's some labs that offer like your first roll of film processed is free, try us out, that kind of thing, because there's different people running these labs and some of them scan things different ways, and that is still a very hands-on process for like getting the scans done from your images. So there's people who love the way that like Richard Photo Lab in LA does film, or they love the way that Indie Photo Lab in Montgomery does it, or whoever it may be. They found that lab that they can really connect with and get those good results out of. So that's something, the more and more you get into shooting film, especially if you are starting to do it for clients, for professional work, or just really wanting to get the most out of it, building that relationship with a lab is huge. And always to, if you ever get something back from a lab that you're not happy with, just talk to them. It doesn't have to be this thing of like, well, these idiots ruined my film, I'm never going back to this one again, or whatever it may be. It may have been that there was a problem with your camera. It may have been that the person who scanned it scanned the way that they like it and not the way that you like it, and they won't know unless you actually tell them. So that is a great thing versus like the drugstore 1 hour lab where what you get is what you get. It's that would when I was working at Wolf, that was our competition, was the drugstore labs. We were always like, well, they just press a button and you get, they don't pay any attention to it. We actually took the time to go and color correct and do things with it. But now with film labs, everybody is going to be paying that much attention to it, and you have the ability to have more control over your images in the scanning and printing process than you ever have before. And
last time,
there's also something nice about that delayed gratification of it too, which is one of my that it's you have to send off your film and maybe wait a week or two to actually get your scans back, and there's something about that lack of immediacy that it feels like being a kid on Christmas morning when you get that email from your lab that your scans are being uploaded right now, or whatever it is, that there's excitement in your photos that you're getting to see what you finally took.
It's very rare that we go backwards, kind of, maybe not in technology, but like 1 hour photo was like the thing, like, and if you didn't have your photos in an hour, like that would like,
it was like 1 hour. It was 1 hour where it's free at one point,
right.
Yeah.
And now it's like, now that we have something that's literally immediate with digital, I love that feeling of like, what, I actually like that I have to wait not only an hour, which is still a long time compared to just pressing the play button, but an entire week to see the images that I captured. And hopefully it's just not an entire like black roll and nothing was exposed or anything, which I've had those nightmares before in film school. When we shot on film, I'm not even gonna get into it. I mean, just like pure nightmares. Just imagining that we got back all of this footage and it's just all black, and then I screwed everything up. But
dude, movie film is not cheap either. That's
it is not. So yeah, I mean, real like wake up sweats. Like, what am I gonna do with my life? So yeah, I'm glad. I'm glad that those days are behind me. You know, at times. Let's go ahead and talk a little bit about cameras now. Now that we know that
Sure.
either start off on Portrait 400, Ultramax. These are good stocks to start off with. What about cameras? Because I mean, there are a lot of cameras. We know this in the world of digital. There's tons of camera. And when it comes to digital, obviously things get obsolete pretty quickly. So in the world
Sure.
of film photography, it seems like, do I really want to buy a camera from like 1986? So
Yes, you do.
yes, you do. Can you talk to me about film cameras? Maybe what's a good camera to start off with, and maybe what's like where we can find one, and what's something that we should look out for just to make sure that it's kosher.
Yeah, totally. So you totally hit the nail on the head that the obsolescence of film cameras is not so much a thing. Like my first medium format camera that I have is a Mamiya RB67. It's this giant like beast of a portrait studio camera that weighs probably like 10 pounds fully loaded. It's awesome, but it's so big and heavy. But that camera, that particular model of a camera, was manufactured by Mamiya for 18 years. I think it's 18. Don't somebody fact check me. It was a long time. It was over 10 years that they made that
Yeah.
particular model of camera. I want to say the Pentax K1000 was made for over 20 years.
Uh-huh.
So yeah, there's a lot of life in these models of cameras. So all that to say, it totally just depends on like how a camera's been like cared for and maintained over the years. The cameras that have the hardest time still are the ones that have really sensitive electrical systems on them. So some of the later models of point and shoot cameras that are maybe a little higher end, a little more advanced, some Contax cameras have a little bit of they take some beautiful images, but they have a little bit of are a little notorious for the electronics failing on them.
Mhm.
That's
Are
like
we
a
talking like
Contax.
the T2 and that sort of thing?
Yeah, exactly. Or even the
Hmm.
Contax 645, this
Mm.
one of the Cadillac medium format, film camera is when they go real bad.
Ugh.
And there's not much fixing them. And when it comes to those kind of things, it's harder and harder to get those cameras repaired. Um, but there are cameras that are a lot more durable than those cameras, and whether it's like an old fully manual camera or even like a newer automatic 35 millimeter camera that just have a lot longer life out of them, and we're just seem to have a lot less of those kind of uh uh failing points in them. So yeah, all that to say, it really is just what you want to learn and use. Because there are all kinds of options. I mean, so if you are a current like SLR shooter, like if you are shooting Canon DSLRs right now and you've got a bunch of EF lenses, you can go get an EOS film body for under $100 that's going to be fully loaded and work great and be totally compatible with any full frame lenses that you have. Like I have a Canon, my Canon EOS film cameras, I use modern Sigma art lenses on them.
Oh, so cool.
And yeah, and they were great. They look beautiful on film. So as long as it's that same lens mount, they're totally compatible. Or same thing if you're like a Nikon shooter, go pick up an F100 or whatever it is that fits that F mount lens. So you've got options for your current lens system if you want to shoot something that's comfortable and you don't want to have to, set aside all that glass you put a lot of money into. But if you're not, or you want something that's just different, you want to shoot film because it feels different. You don't want something that feels quite like what your regular camera is. Or if you're just starting from, ground zero, I mean, there's a ton of great manual style 35 millimeter cameras. I started, like I said, on the Canon AE1. I've got a AE1 program sitting right here, which is kind of a little more kind of the next iteration of that camera. There's a lot of options available to kind of learn and use and play with. Something like that is a great start. There's like the Nikon F2E. I mean, you have a lot of different options as far as like manual 35mm cameras.
So try to find a camera with the least amount of electronics in it, and you should be okay.
So yeah, I mean, I wouldn't say avoid ones that have a lot of electronics, because like my Canon EOS cameras have a lot of electronics in them. They've got
but that's more of a high end. That's like a professional grade film camera,
right? But
because I'm thinking about, like, I have a Pentax K1000, and I think my dad bought it in like 1986, right?
Yeah,
like brand new from Sears, and like it still works great. I've never had to put a battery in it. There's no screen. There's no nothing. I mean, there's a light meter, but again, I haven't put a battery in it, and it still functions, I would imagine, like it did the day that he bought it. Whereas if I bought a Canon XT, from 2006, like that thing's gonna be garbage. Like I'm not gonna be able to use much of that at all. So
the shutter is going to be going out, and the image sensor is probably going to fail before that. So
right.
Definitely. And the nice thing too is that there's some great resources to actually find cameras that can perform really well, and you're not just going to get a clunker. I mean, there's a lot of places to buy film gear. eBay is always, it's eBay. It's always a gamble on what you might actually get out of it, especially on some film equipment. That's where I got my first AE1, was eBay, just because I didn't have any idea, and I got lucky that my camera wasn't junk. That it worked great, but you're not guaranteed that. So there's some one of the best places to go to get film photography gear is KEH. I don't know if you're familiar with them at all. Yeah,
I mean, I've used them many times. That's where I bought my my Mamiya 645. Yeah, and it was fantastic. It's fantastic.
Oh, they're amazing. They're actually based here in the Atlanta area.
I did not know that.
They're actually just a couple of miles away from my house. So
do they have a showroom floor? Like, can you go in and look at all their stuff? Do you do that
all
the time?
That's a missed opportunity. I know they have. They have so much stuff and so much inventory that they're constantly like moving through. It would be, I think, kind of a nightmare to stock a showroom.
But when like they're always at trade shows, and they always bring like the gold M6 or is it the M4 or whatever it is.
They have a gold M6. They have a gold Hasselblad 500 CM, and they have a gold Polaroid SX70.
See, they can bring those on display. Why can't they just have a nice little cabinet? Because I would love that.
Yeah, I mean, I think they've talked about it. Like I have a few friends who are actually there. I think it's been like kind of thrown around a bit. I'm sure COVID kind of changed some of those plans and put them on the back burner. But but KEH is just fantastic as far as the way that they actually take care of the gear that they're selling, and actually like inspect it and grade it, and then also guarantee it. So for starters, you can call them if you don't know what you're looking for, and they have some fantastic salespeople who know their stuff and will like walk you through things. They have like a 30-day unconditional money back guarantee on stuff. So if you get a camera, you just hate it, send it back. Or if it somehow didn't make it, there was some issue, they'll send you a replacement. They'll, they warranty their stuff, and their grading process. I mean, geez, their bargain cameras are what most places would consider to be like very good as far as just like how much they're scrutinizing the gear that comes in there. So nothing but good things to say about KEH. Also, if you're looking to sell gear too, you can always, I think sometimes they do give you extra credit when you're doing, like, say, a trade in towards a purchase and stuff. So
Right, right.
uh,
I'll be sure to put a link in the show notes. Obviously, if anybody's driving right now, to be able to check that out. As yeah, I mean, I agree. I can't say anything negative about KEH as well. So
yeah, I mean,
that's
there's
great.
some other places like B&H and Adorama both have used stores, but KEH, it's what they do, and they do it really, really well.
Hmm.
Um, if you do have a local camera store around, though, that might deal in like used equipment, go. Obviously, right now, put on a mask, be safe about it, take care of them and yourself. But if you can go safely and feel comfortable doing it, go into a shop and get your hands on a camera too. I mean, that's always going to be the most important thing and best way to experience something, and if it feels right. Like, we actually have, there's another camera store here in Atlanta that is been around for like 100 years that really does specialize in used and consignment equipment and stuff, and always has stuff kind of rotating through. And so they're called Wings Camera. They're awesome about getting to go in and like just play and check stuff out. So like they do have a showroom unlike KEH, but a lot less
Burn.
inventory.
Yeah. That's
But
hilarious.
also, yeah, it's just awesome to go in and see what they get and to try stuff. So if you do have maybe like a little obscure camera store or whatever it may be in your part of town, um, absolutely go pay them a visit. You might find like some kind of hidden gem or something. But um, yeah, without a doubt, the most trustworthy place in the States is KEH for getting used camera gear.
Yeah.
Um, there's
I
some
mean,
awesome places too, like Japan Camera Hunter. He's Bellamy Hunt who does that. He's in Japan. He's definitely going to be kind of more on the obscure higher end kind of gear and stuff too. But he, like the name says, he's hunting Japan for cameras, and has his own line of film even that he's selling and everything now too. So that's a great option if you are trying to find something that you can't get at KEH or whatever it may be.
well, like I said, am going to put all of those locations in the show notes to check out. I am not super familiar with Japan Camera Hunter, so I'm definitely going to see what I can find over there. And I know my wife's not going to be too happy about a new box showing up to the house, but
He's got
it's a
some cool
business expense,
stuff.
right? Yeah, so
Yeah, exactly. It's
yeah,
all a write off, man. That's right.
it's all a write off. I love
All
it.
a write
Yeah.
off.
So
Yeah, Japan Hammer Hunter. Bellamy's a good dude. He's also super snarky on Twitter and in a lot of his posts. So he's just entertaining to follow in general.
that's great. That's great. I want to know from you, as somebody who has been shooting for film, as long as you have. First of all, I know that we've gone way over the amount of time that we, said that we were going to be here today. So I have two
Obviously,
last
I can talk
questions
about
for
this
you.
stuff for a while, so no worries, man.
And I love it. That's why I've been looking at my questions here, and of course I always write way too many questions. So I have two last questions here for you. Do you still have time for those?
Yeah, absolutely.
Awesome. Okay, so for having shot film for as long as you have, for being in that world and going through the transition, from film to digital, and now, kind of the resurgence of film again, and being throughout all of it, I'm interested to hear from you. Like, what is some common, just bad information that you hear being taught to new photographers, specifically about shooting film?
Ooh, okay. Well, probably the worst piece of information that I see is that film is dead.
Mm-hmm.
It is far from it. It is alive and it is well. Even if there are some places like, if a film stock is discontinued, there's probably going to be another one or two popping up the next month to replace it or fill its shoes, or somebody else who's producing more of a particular stock to meet a need. The film has never been better than it is right now. All of
Whoa.
the
Film
Yeah,
has never been better than it is right now. That's a
film
bold
is
statement.
film has never been better. Yeah, the films that are produced in the year 2021 are the best films that have ever been made. Just from a, not necessarily like, I'm not trying to say that like if you were in love with Kodachrome and that's all you ever wanted to shoot on your entire life and now it's gone,
Well,
that was the
analog,
best film. No, I mean, yes, personally, there are films that are no longer available now that might have been appealed to people more or like connected with more or whatever it may be. But just from a technical standpoint, the films that are made now, more research, more technology, more this ability to capture images well has been put into them than ever before. Like the Kodak Ektachrome that was just reintroduced a couple years ago is a insanely advanced like just piece of science and engineering, like how much work was actually put into that. So yeah, film is far from dead. I got to take a tour of the actual Kodak film factory in Rochester, New York, a few years ago, and it was insane just the scale of the operation of this thing still. And we're walking through the finishing like packaging area, and there's just pallets of film going out the door. And they had just brought another film stock back, Kodak T-Max 3200, like right at that time. And they were like, yeah, this is our 5th order of it because we're just selling out of everything that we're making. So Kodak can't make the film fast enough. It is going out the door as fast as they produce it. So film's definitely not dead.
So if somebody is worried about buying a film camera today and not having film, here soon, that's really not something to be worried about.
No, I would say absolutely not.
Awesome.
Yeah, I would say that there's going to be a long, bright future for film shooters and for capturing things on film. And it's in the same way that like vinyl has come back in, in music. I mean, people in the 90s and 2000s thought that a record player was an obsolete piece of technology, man. And then all of those reasons why a vinyl record is a beautiful thing is why there's new vinyl presses being made and there's new, so it's why places like Kodak are making new emulsions of film and reintroducing old ones that they discontinued because there's a demand for it and people are kind of falling. New photographers are finding it for the first time, and people who loved it and set it down are coming back to it too. So however much whether they shoot a roll of film a year or whether they shoot a roll of film a day, there's people who are putting film in cameras and making images. So yeah, that would be the biggest thing. That would be my biggest pet peeve when people do say that like film's not going to be around or it's not going to exist. It's like, yes, it is. It's going to be here. Go out and shoot it. And you know what? If film stopped tomorrow, I would still be shooting every single roll of film I have, and I would be enjoying the process and loving it. And that's something that if film were to go away, nothing could take away from me those moments that I was able to capture and the joy of capturing it on that medium. So, you know what, if just because it may be finite, that shouldn't stop someone from exploring it and actually enjoying the moments they're capturing and the moments that they experience in doing that capturing.
Wow. Did you ever see that documentary about the Impossible Project that they did for like when Polaroid went under, they said that they were going to stop developing
Time Zero, dude.
Time Zero. That's it. Yeah.
I was like, I have a T-shirt from like the very first run of the Impossible Project. Like I was a huge Polaroid fan. Like, so when they were trying to like even buy the factory and stuff, like I've been an Impossible Project and now Polaroid, again, fanboy since day one. So yeah.
What you said there, even if they stop making film tomorrow, you would still fully enjoy the process, and it's not going to take away anything from you. Reminded me of something that was said in the documentary as well. It was I can't remember, of course, who it was, but it was a photographer who just shot everything on Polaroid. Like that was just his deal. And when he found out that Polaroid was going to stop shooting or stop producing their own film, like he went to the store and just said, give me it all. Like, I'm just
Yeah.
gonna continue to like enjoy this until it's gone, and then that's gonna be it. So that's awesome to hear, because it's a totally different experience than shooting digital. You know, being forced to slow down. You know, these are the things that people praise film for. You know, the slowing down, the I guess built-in aesthetic to it. You know, it already looks like
Yeah,
film because it
sure.
is film.
Exactly.
And you know, having to really focus on those 36 frames that you got, and not being able to just go out and just rapid fire everything and then just delete later and only pick out the winners. It's really interesting stuff. So I want to say that, you know, I really appreciate your time today. You know, everything that you've shared here. But I got one last question for you here.
Please, man, go right ahead.
It's, you know, with how fast digital technology is advancing in terms of, you know, DSLRs. You have a top of the line Canon 5D Mark IV. Is there a feature of a modern camera that you would love to see in a film camera?
Ooh, being made is the modern feature
Just
that I would
being
love to
made.
see, just being made.
Of course. I mean,
That's
let's get over that hurdle
Yeah,
first.
all right.
What after that?
Oh, geez. So I do wish that you could actually have some like metadata or EXIF data from a film camera.
Just so that you could record your settings that you use to
Yeah,
capture that
and also
image.
even having a timestamp on it would be
Yeah.
great. That would make my life a lot easier, because that is the one thing that truly sucks about shooting weddings on film
I didn't even
is
think of that.
is I have to go in and manually insert, the film in the timeline of everything.
Oh man, that
It's
you would think that like by now, because I mean I know with motion picture there is a maybe not so much now, but there used to be an extra strip on the side of film where they would record film. You know, it was like a magnetic medium, as they did with like tape at the time,
Mhm.
and you could record information onto. Maybe it wasn't directly onto that frame that it was associated with, but yeah, you would think that there would be a way, but I would assume that would be a huge technological advancement in something that is you know, at this point not as profitable perhaps as digital photography, and would require an entire like recreation of the production process. So
Totally. I mean, and that's why you don't see places like Canon or Nikon or whoever like producing new 35 millimeter cameras, even though the demand is there.
mhm.
That's, and actually I'm going to go back to a previous question you asked about like where you should start on a camera. There are some new cameras being made outside of just a disposable 35 millimeter camera, which can still be a great camera, even though it's a plastic camera, plastic lens, no control. There's a few different companies, including Harman Technology, who owns Ilford Film Manufacturing, have basically made reusable disposable cameras.
Yes.
So they're inexpensive. They're really straightforward, but they're reloadable. They're less expensive than buying disposable cameras over and over, and there's way less waste in them. And they actually just announced they're having a new version of that camera that has automatic advance on the film. So they're starting to like build more and more of this stuff coming up. So that's a great place to start if you want to just have film and you want to just have that point and shoot look and have the flash on. Pick up the Harman reusable 35 millimeter cameras. You can buy those new from I want to say like B&H or Freestyle Photo or just wherever on the internet, so that's a great option for somebody to.
My favorite thing about the disposable cameras is the wind, is the sound of the zzz, zzz, when you're
totally.
or when you're advancing it. That's my favorite part. So the fact that they're taking that away makes me very upset. So I would definitely buy
you have the option.
version.
You can definitely buy the manual one. It's like
Don't take away
20 or 30 bucks cheaper to buy the manual one. But dude, if working in a 1 hour lab, that whenever we would get in disposable cameras, you have to advance the film all the way to the end if no one else did.
Oh, that just has to kill you.
Oh, dude, I think I still have a callus on my thumb from just sitting there, just like doing this before you had to do that before you popped them open to get the film out. Otherwise,
Oh
you'd fall.
man,
So
that's
I'm not as
hilarious.
crazy about that manual.
Advance as I am.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I like the
Okay,
manual
I get
advance
it.
on a camera where it's not like just like a little sharp piece of plastic.
Sure. Yeah, designed to dig directly into your thumb. I get that. That's
Oh,
hilarious.
jeez.
Oh man. Well, Steven, again, man, I truly appreciate your time today and talking to me about photography and cameras and film and just kind of nerding out. This was a really fun chat. I know that a lot of listeners are going to enjoy this as well. If they want to find out more about you and follow you online, can you share where they can do that?
Yeah, absolutely. So, my website, which is pretty much just like wedding and portrait client work, is just StephenWallacePhoto.com. So that's StevenWallace photo.com. I'm on Instagram at Stephen Wallace Photo, Twitter, which is pretty much just a repost of my Instagram feed, is Stephen W Photo, and then I'm Facebook.com/Stephen Wallace Photo.
Perfect. Steven, again, man, thank you so much for coming on and sharing everything that you did.
Dude, absolutely, Raymond. I really enjoyed it. Thank you again for asking me. This was a lot of fun. I would love to do it again sometime.
I'll tell you what, it is so much fun when, oftentimes when talking about photography, there's lots of challenges, there's lots of struggles to get to kind of where they are today, which most of the guests on the podcast have taken photography as their career. So not only is there the difficulty and the challenges of just learning photography and mastering, the craft and the art of photography itself, but then there's also that journey of, being in business, and that can be difficult as well. But talking with Steven, here obviously we didn't chat too much about the business side of things and focused solely on film and, you know, what I love about film is that within the world of photography, film almost feels like a hobby within photography. And maybe that's just me because I'm also in business as a photographer. But this conversation really felt like a breath of fresh air. It felt, just fun to chat about these things that we find very enjoyable, and these, happy little accidents that we can have when shooting film, and why it's important to us to kind of continue that creative journey as well. So, Stephen, if you're listening, man, thank you so much for just sharing everything that you did. Uh, I truly had a blast, and look forward to having you come back on in the future so that we can talk more about film, the whole world of film. Maybe we'll get more into developing next time. So I would love to hear your biggest takeaway from this episode of the Beginner Photography Podcast. You can go ahead and leave your comments. Join the Beginner Photography Podcast Facebook group. It is, the safest place on the internet for photographers to come ask questions, share ideas, and not feel like you don't belong there, because everybody's at a different point in their photography journey, and we welcome everybody, no matter where you're at. So come on in, join the Beginner Photography Podcast Facebook group. And again, I would love to hear your thoughts on this episode with Stephen Wallace. So that is it for this week. I hope that, within this time as it's starting to get warmer, you're going to be able to get out and snap a few photos, and just enjoy photography for what it is, whether it's a hobby for you, whether it is a profession for you, whether it's an aspiring profession for you, whatever it is, we have a tool in our hand. We can capture something that has never been captured before and will never be captured again, because that's just kind of how time works. So don't take that lightly. Take it very seriously. Get out, capture something meaningful. And until next week, have fun, stay safe. I'll see you then.
Thank you for listening to the Beginner Photography Podcast. If you enjoy the show, consider leaving a review in iTunes. Keep shooting, and we'll see you next week.
I mean, I'm originally from Calgary, Alberta, Canada,
You just have
and
to drive everywhere.
everywhere. Like the closest city to Calgary is close to 2 hours away.
Oh,
And then
jeez.
meanwhile, I had a family who came to visit us here in Atlanta, and they're just like, so wait, you have cities, like, yeah, like Chattanooga's like an hour and a half. Nashville's only like 4 hours, like Savannah's only 5, and just like all of the stuff that's so clustered around in the Southeast.
It's amazing. Yeah, it's absolutely amazing. It's one of the things I love about Indy as well, because growing up in California, it was like there was Napa, and then, there's San Francisco, and then there's nothing for 8 hours until you get to LA, like absolutely nothing. So when I would have to drive home from school, it was just like cow fields all day long for like an entire 8 hours. So it's like being here, it's just like what you were saying. It's like Chicago's 4 hours. St. Louis is 4 hours, Cincinnati's 4 hours. And I was like, all this stuff is super close, which is great because all of those cities, the Dodgers play like all the teams that live in those cities. So like it's not too far from me, pretty centrally located. So it's a score.